Thanks so much for having us, and thank you for letting us see. I'm Kathy Tagg, and I'm a UCT alum who's been based in New York for the past, since 2001, where I went to Manus and did the doctorate at Manhattan School of Music. And I'm here with David Krakauer, native New Yorker, and my main collaborator in life and projects, who is also on the faculty at Manhattan School of Music, Manus College of Music, and Bard Conservatory. And it was wonderful hearing my colleagues in the previous presentation, and just knowing that there's so many incredible colleagues and friends presenting at the moment. So thank you so much for having us. What we wanted to do was, because we are primarily performers and practitioners and creators who are putting our stuff out into the world, we thought we actually wanted to introduce our collaborative body of work, and specifically the evolution of our processes leading towards our project Breath and Hammer, The Ties That Bind Us, which is a large evening length work created for the Pierre Boulez Saal in Berlin and redesigned as a multifaceted digitality portal for the venue. And we thought we would trace the evolution of a single project, our Breath and Hammer duo, over the span of 7 or 8 years of continual growth, as it's formed a deep part of our musical world since 2013, and has formed the basis for all the other work we have created in the interim, from co-composing clarinet concerto for David, that's been done around the world, to co-creating, writing, performing our first feature film, to creating large-scale dialogue works for the International Center for Dialogue in Poland, to band projects created during the pandemic. So we thought, though, tracing the evolution might be an interesting way to see how we went from a very acoustic, sort of analog place to a large-scale immersive creation.
So greetings, everybody. Great to be here virtually in Cape Town.
In C7.
Yes. So Kathleen and I have been working together since 2011, beginning with more traditional repertoire, classical repertoire for the clarinet, Brahms Sonata, Debussy Rhapsody, a short piece by Janacek, plus simple arrangements of traditional klezmer songs. And for us, playing together was always extremely organic from the start, but we wanted to begin to introduce more things from our own personal sound worlds, creative sound worlds, including, for me, my work with Eastern European Jewish klezmer music, the music of my cultural heritage. And that, of course, led me to many, many things in my career, including having a concerti written for me, working with amazing string quartets like the Kronos and the Emerson, and also getting to incorporate influences of jazz, funk, hip hop, electro into the work of the various bands that I lead. And I saw that Kathy was also exploring her own parallel path in mixing genres, creating projects that blurred stylistic lines, working in theater, and starting to create her own personal sound world and body of work. And so it seemed natural to start including that in our work together. And so we started to arrange tunes that were by performer friends of ours who came from all parts of the world. And they gave us lead sheets to recreate and reimagine these works. And we had a wonderful opportunity back in 2013. We were invited to play a beautiful concert in Paul. And that was the start of our new journey, with a classical first half and then a more creative and open second half. And we were trying to think of things we could do together, and kept coming back to the idea of New York City and this idea of New York songs, and we're a place where we had the whole world really at our disposal. And we had all these incredible people, this circle of friends, who were personal connections of ours. And all of the composers are people we know, close friends or colleagues from New York who come from all over the place. And so what we got from them was a lead sheet. And for some people that meant 3 lines with nothing but melodies. Some of them added chords. Some had a measure, a bass line. Some had tempo indications, some not. And then we pulled out of these pieces much longer structures, and we fleshed them out in terms of form, and we found our own sounds. And they allowed us to recast their music in a way that made sense to us. And that's really the key, that we were making something really original of our own, and that each piece is its own unique sound world.
In 2015, we began experimenting with incorporating loops and samples, ultimately creating our electroacoustic show, Breath and Hammer, with live video feed, which extended ideas from our acoustic programs. We wanted to do a project where we took the entirety of sounds that we could find from our 2 instruments, including a plethora of extended techniques, very much tailored to create a completely different orchestration for each piece, and make a giant piano orchestra, and in some cases a huge clarinet choir, using loops and samples to create a giant orchestral texture out of just the 2 instruments. One of the key things that we wanted to do for this project was to leave all sounds untreated. So the sounds that we utilize in our scores are very un-piano-like often, but they're completely untreated. So it was kind of pushing this idea of how far we could go with the untreated sounds from our instruments. And you know, I'm tapping into a very long, more than century-long tradition of using extended techniques in the piano, dating back to Henry Cowell's early explorations around 1908, etc. But I've made my own very personal body of sounds and created my own techniques to find the sounds that I wanted. And the starting point of our program is our arrangements of songs by composers who are close friends and associates, including people such as the New York-based saxophonist John Zorn, Syrian clarinetist and composer Kinan Azmeh, and percussionist from Cuba, Roberto Rodriguez, as well as our own original compositions, and then influences ranging from all sorts of things around the world. How we went about it was that I create these giant orchestral scores, sometimes as many as 40 instruments, with as many as 40 layers, and working very much in terms of an imagined palette of orchestral sounds. And then coming up with, for example, string parts, bowed string parts, pizzicato things, very complex drum patterns, as well as imagined instruments, things like silvery angel shimmers with chains on the strings, things like that. And all of these sounds produced on the piano are using completely non-invasive techniques. We were talking, I heard the discussion about the gloves touching the mbira and instruments, and I actually use, I've developed all sorts of techniques to be able to touch copper strings, for example, on the bass of the piano, while wearing surgical gloves, because unlike the mbira, the copper strings of the piano do not like finger juice. So, you know, all sorts of things like that, and everything that I use is has been found from around the house, things like scarves, paper, etc. David and I then we went on to workshop it, and David would then add in all sorts of great riffs and additional material, and then I'll incorporate that into the score. So it's very much this two-way process. And one of the big things for us is that there's always space for improvisation in the structure. but it's highly structured so that it all hangs together as a whole. In our acoustic shows, there's much more flexibility, with length and structure of the improvised sections. But when we're dealing with the loops and samples, it's obviously very, very highly structured. So it's this mix of freedom, but with very heavy duty organization and structure around it. We had the opportunity to workshop this project for about a week at a place called Yellow Barn in the US. And we took a great engineer and friend with us to help record all the samples. And there's tens of thousands of samples that we use, created painstakingly, one at a time, and then layered and cut up. And he was also incredibly helpful just in terms of the time that we had available to help us construct a workflow to be able to use our loops and samples within the context of a live performance. Our very first show came just a few hours after recording the final samples, with the charts still hot off the press, and that we were adding to the charts all day, every day, and working. It was a very interesting experience, to say the least.
Yes, indeed. So in our next iteration, we decided to incorporate an idea that Kathy had to bring the audience inside our sound world visually in real time via a portable multi-camera immersive video feed. We reached out to Los Angeles-based video artist Jesse Gilbert to create a very simple to use portable visual setup that we could take on the road with us. And we went to see him in LA to experiment and see what we could come up with. He designed us a super simple to use but effective system using 3 security cameras with an option of a random shuffle containing multiple types of fades, saturation, and color options, as well as a manual override system that could be operated live. For those of you who know their Cycling 74 products, he was customizing elements from Max MSP to use in a visual context. We toured with this for a number of years, including bringing it to Makanda for the National Arts Festival and a pop-up concert at Youngblood in Cape Town.
So in, finish this. Sorry, it's stop sharing. In 2018, we were asked to create a new project for the Pierre Boulez Saal in Berlin, which premiered in 2019. It's a fully immersive audiovisual surround sound concert art installation experience called The Ties That Bind Us. And with the help of Jesse Gilbert, who had designed our very simple system that we traveled with using the security cameras, we took the main building blocks of that Breath and Hammer project and greatly expanded it. And for the Boulez Saal performances, Jesse came along with us and helped us realize his design live. So we took the main building blocks of Breath and Hammer, and the key thing that was to figure out how to do projections in a round hall. And my original idea was to project onto the floor all around us and possibly on scrims on the sides of the piano. But collaboratively, this idea evolved with Jesse and the team at the hall to have us enclosed in a giant 16-foot high hexagonal scrim structure with projections from 6 sides. We spent a vast amount of time creating a very structured visual world that complements the arc of the music and which unfolds bit by bit. Having spent a lot of time working in theater, this felt incredibly important to me. The other new element I really wanted was to create short spatialized tape piece interludes that act as bridges between the different pieces on the program, in a nod both to the namesake of the hall with 2 separate 6-channel speaker setups on each level surrounding the audience, and that would be Pierre Boulez, as well as these musical human bridges between the pieces as a nod to the work being done by the Barenboim Said Academy and the East West Divan Orchestra, which are both housed at the hall. And the interludes with their sound, which travel spatially within the hall, represent that influence coming to us from outside, from traditions that are not our own, but that we are very fortunate to have been exposed to from through our friends and their music, our friends from around the world. Some interludes begin with elements from the preceding piece that may be indistinguishable in their new context, and then invite elements of the next piece to lead into it. The sound design for the project utilizes two distinct levels. For each of the main pieces, the sound comes directly from the central stage, and we had set up a speaker configuration using their system from the roof, as well as reinforcing with additional monitors that were based on the floor around the base of the hexagon to balance it out, as it should be incredibly organic with the live sound and the loops and samples that get played, and it should all sound like it's coming from the central space. And then the interludes travel on a journey through the surround sound speaker configuration that acts both as a kind of sonic representation of musical offerings from one piece to the next, as well as a nod to the ties that bind us one to the other, no matter how far apart we may seem. This added element enabled us to create a non-stop continuous performance, and additionally gave us an entirely new visual palette. And I'm going to show a little clip in just about a minute, so you'll be able to see more of what we're talking about. But you'll notice Jesse has microphones set up around the hall which pick up the sound waves of the interludes. And using his original spectral GI software, which he's created, he transforms those sound waves into visual representations of the sound. And in this little clip, I'm gonna ask Clive to play. You can better see what we're talking about. The clips that contain our images are all the main pieces on the program, each set in its own color palette, rate of change, rate of movement through the cameras, number of images projected simultaneously, etc., to create a constant visual unfolding. And then the pieces that you see that contain colored images are from the interludes and are different visualizations of the sound waves set into the visual palette of the following piece. So Clive, if you might be able to play that for us, that would be very helpful. We wanted to create an immersive, multi-layered concert experience that celebrates our shared humanity and our connections to each other as human beings.
Our starting point was a collection of lead sheets of pieces by brilliant friends and colleagues who come from different parts of the world, backgrounds, points of view, music, and styles.
The main pieces of music are linked by little interludes that act as musical bridges containing hidden elements from the piece that comes before and the piece after. They are designed to surround the audience with sound and to fly around the space through a multi-speaker setup, reflecting the influences coming to us from our friends from all over the world.
There are 9 main pieces, each with its totally distinct orchestration, look and feel, lighting, and way each composition unfolds visually. created our own arrangements of our friends' pieces using only sounds of the clarinet and piano, layering them up into a giant orchestral texture with loops and samples. The visual projections bring the audience inside the creation of the sound, highlighting what is happening in the music.
Projections that Jessie creates during our musical interludes are live interactive visualizations of the sound waves. Designed this project to be flexible for different spaces, from a proscenium to a square and beyond. This version was designed with Jessie Gilbert for Berlin's beautiful Pierre Boulez Zaal's Theatre in the Round configuration. And you can feel it now live. We are Kathleen Tagg
and David Krakauer. We hope you can join us on this journey that we call Breath and Hammer, the
So I hope that gave a little more context of what we've been talking about. For those who are interested, I created a set for the interludes in Ableton Live using Max for Live to integrate the sound design for the interludes. And the user interface is very friendly, although it required immense time to create the individual movement parts of each of the hundreds of individual samples that were used. Visually, though, it's a great tool for being able to map the trajectory of the movement visually between all of the speakers, so that I could really create specific and intentional movement patterns between the 12 speakers placed behind the audio. And apart from two of the interludes, which have David interacting, they're all straight tape pieces, so all parameters could be set in advance and could be set on each sample, could have its own trajectory if needed. And I use the 1 to 2 minutes of each interlude to grab the preparations of the piece I've just played out of the piano and get set up for the next one so that we can segue seamlessly into a completely different sound role. Anyway, we wanted to introduce this and then open it up now for questions, and we'd love to hear what might be of interest to any of you to know more about.
Kathleen and David, magnificent. Standing ovation here in Cape Town. It was brilliant stuff. It's thoroughly enjoyable and so informative. Thank you so much for the amount of work that has gone into preparing this wonderful work. I'd like to indeed open up the floor for questions, if there are any questions from our audience. Then I will shoot off the first one. It's directed at David. David, I have the sense that, and excuse my pronunciation, klezmer music, the traditional style, is that pronounced correctly? Klezmer?
Klezmer, yeah. Mm-hmm. Yes.
Klezmer. So I do apologize for my ignorance. I have a sense that forms that style of clarinet expression forms a very important foundation. It forms it binds Breath and Hammer together. You know, it holds it together for me. Am I correct? Because it seems to me as if it's a musical style, a performance style that is really very well adaptable to different forms of modernity or modern expression. So am I completely on the wrong path here, or would you like to say a couple of words about that, please?
Well, thank you for that question. You know, you're absolutely correct. But I think the way I see it is that you know, when I started to play klezmer in my early 30s, you know, I was trying to find a way to come back to creativity. I had played jazz as a kid, as a teenager, and then I abandoned jazz for over 10 years because I felt like I couldn't bring my own originality to the table. And all my idols like Coleman Hawkins, Sidney Bechet, Charlie Parker, John Coltrane, you know, each one had such an individual voice. But in my early 30s, I started to play klezmer first very traditionally, learning from old records from the 1920s. Cool. And then I decided, okay, here's a path to originality because I can use this style as a kind of a home base, as a jumping off point. And then I started mixing in all of my other influences, you know, and playing 10 years of playing, you know, contemporary music in New York City and being exposed to so many composers and improvising and all of that. So that's really that the klezmer became a raw material for me to create my own sound world, essentially.
I see. Wow, magnificent. It's beautiful. All I can say is beautiful. It's moving stuff.
Kathy.
Oh, we have an online question via Zoom, and then we'll move to a question from the hall. So, Jonathan, please proceed.
Hi, Kathy. Hi, David. I wanted to tag on from the first question there onto you, Kathy. I mean, it's just so interesting I followed the album when it came out and stuff, and it's interesting to see how you're evolving this kind of sonic palette. I mean, do you spend a whole bunch of time working on that regularly? And then it's the double question. The second question is, I'm you know, as you know me, I'm super intrigued with the decision to use no processing. Is that like a you know, a flagpole that you're waving going into war, or is it just something that's of interest in relation to the project?
Hi, firstly, great to see again so many colleagues here. So I'll start with the second question. And so actually what I've been wanting to do for years is put us through all the filters of, you know, imaginable. I've got my racks of keyboards. I want to put David, I want to, you know, do all sorts of things with him. But we wanted to first, because the sound that we are getting out of our instruments are there's so many, and there's such a huge palette, and sort of creating this gargantuan orchestra out of it. And so many of the sounds do not sound anything like what you would expect from our instruments. We wanted that to first have a place to fully shine. So whether it's in the acoustic or the electric, or then in the large scale immersive project. So it's not I have a problem with processing. That's very much on the agenda, and that's very much actually going to be part of the next project, which we're going to be doing for the whole next year with a string quartet, and also using the hexagon and attempting to figure out new visual parameters. But that's something I've been wanting to do for, you know, since I've started working with David. But I felt, you know, what we've sort of created is so personal. I wanted that to first be heard. About the time, I mean, when we were creating this, I honestly don't think I would ever do it again if I knew what what would go into, for example, that album. It's, you know, David says it's like a tapestry made up of, you know, the size of our apartment, made up of like fingernail size samples sewn together. It's, you know, tens of thousands of tiny little samples sewn together. And, you know, if you make an entire string section, for example, of just the violins and then the cellos, etc., instead of dom, bom, 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 which you can easily just do, it's like sampling the bow, getting one, cutting it, layering it, then the next one, and little sound, and then layering things up so that you have an entire library of sounds to draw on. I certainly have not been working on that. Recently, we've been branching out and doing a lot of other things. But as we were, in the process of creating this, yes, we were very, very heavily involved. The album actually took me 5 years to make. And if I hadn't learned how to use, the tools and edited everything myself and produced everything, there's no ways it would have cost like $100,000 to make. So.
And then in the hall, we have Cameron Harris as a guest with us. Cameron, please, to the microphone.
Hi, great to see you both again after.
Hi.
Cool. My question is also about process to do with the visuals. So they're interactive, but they're also being marshaled by Jesse. So he's got some control over them, but they're also interactive. Is that correct?
So yes, so he has control. We've got the different versions that tour. We can tour without him, but we cannot do the interludes without him.
Okay.
And once we're dealing with a structure, the more surfaces you introduce, obviously the harder it becomes. Actually, the hexagon was actually absolutely bonkers. The most expensive part of the project was actually getting 6 matching projections with high enough lumens, and then figuring out how to, in such a live acoustic space, to actually dampen them so that you don't get a whirring sound of the fans, etc. Being able to actually turn them visually, instead of having them project 16:9 this way, but to be able to, turn, and it was a gargantuan thing. So, what we started with was when we first got together with Jesse, he was like, "Oh, this is so cool," and so I'll jam. And I was like, no jamming, no. And he's like, but that's how I work. And I said, yeah, but this is going to be a show that has got to last for, it's about a 75-minute show. And so if it basically has got to continue to visually evolve as we go. And so you'll see it starts at the top of the program with a piece where there's only one camera image. So we have up to 4 cameras that can be used in different ways. So only one image, and all of the surfaces are covered with the same image. It's an incredibly slow rate of change. It's sort of sepia tinged, nostalgic. It's a very intimate color. And the next one, for example, will blow up into a totally different black and white. Jesse made the mistake. We went to his studio in LA, and he made the mistake of showing us what he could actually do. And I took like about 150 obsessive photos and videos and things, and then went home and compiled a dramaturgical arc for the project, which he then was like, I don't know what you're talking about. What's this black and white negative thing, or this sepia saturation, or this or that? And I was like, oh, here's the clip, and you showed us this, that, and the next thing. He's like, well, I can't just go between these things. And I was like, I bet you can. And he did. He's figured out, he eventually mapped the entire thing. So he has got space to improvise within that. So, but the basic structures and parameters of the entire project are set in terms of the rate of unfolding. All images are static until the halfway point, or about the 2/3 point, at which point we start to have one image that rotates around the others while they stay static. And by the end, you've got crossing images in a kind of a circle dance, going around each other and circling. And Jesse's control panel, he's able to see the full 6 surfaces and to treat them as a continuous whole.
Wow.
So it's highly, highly, highly organized. I'm just talking about the main pieces of the program now, of which there are 9. And the way that unfolds visually over the course of the duration of the evening. Because what we didn't want to have, and what I do often see, is that the audience settles in and they go like, oh, okay, this is what it's going to be. And I wanted them, it's immediately when they get to the 9-minute mark, when the second piece comes in, that they go like, we don't know what this is going to be, and we have absolutely no idea. And the big thing was also matching the visual world with the sonic world, and each piece of music is arranged completely differently. It's got its completely different orchestration. It's a completely different audio world, and so we wanted the visuals to match that. I know this is a really lengthy answer, but then for the interludes, Jesse, again, those palettes, you know, the way, you know, for example, there's loop patterns, there's, you know, sort of wave pattern. You saw a few of the different options that, you know, the way that the visual representations can be done. And then we had that very much also mapped in terms of palette, that, you know, so that the colors would go into the next, you'd be ushered into the next piece that was going to be coming up, and it would sort of set up that that visual world. But that is done where the microphones are live around the hall, and so that is literally being processed live from the microphones being turned into visualizations. So that is all live. He's able to control, you know, rate of change, also, you know, sort of parameters if he feels like playing. And he does, you know, he's a trained composer, actually was his first line of work. And then he went into video and has, you know, worked in creating his own softwares, but he's often using tools that he actually knew from his composition world originally. So it's very much akin to what we're doing with the project and with our work, where there's room for improvisation, and that is utilized, but at the same time it's highly structured, and it's within a bigger, you know, there's microstructures and macrostructures within each piece, and then within the project as a whole.
Amazing. What a team you've got together. That's amazing. And it looks fantastic. Even on Zoom here, the little that we saw, it looks and sounds amazing. So is the full video available of one of the concerts? You talked about the album, but can we see the visuals as well?
No, so we do have that, but we are not allowed to share it. I mean, I think for the concert tonight, we've got the very first piece on the program, so it's the most static of them, but it's just an incredibly beautiful music, and that we're allowed to share, and we're allowed to share these short snippets. But because we actually went back in 2021, when everything was still locked down, we went back to Berlin and spent a week there creating an entire digital world for them. So with interviews, with little portals, and each piece of music containing a separate little world around it, and they're going to, you know, use it or not as, you know, as develop their own digitality portal. But where, you know, then the basis of that is the concert work and, you know, apps that have been built out of that and all sorts of things. But
okay, amazing. Thanks so much.
Great to see you.
Kathleen, David, there are many, many more things to discuss. However, unfortunately, I think we're going to have to say goodbye for a minute. You are coming to Cape Town, and we're doing this show. There's just no if and buts about it, right? Thanks a million, and take care.
Thank you.